Okay, how's it going, everyone? Double check and make sure I'm broadcasting audio. Good enough. So, got into a nice little argument with our buddy Jungle Jargon again. Share screen. Oh, hold on. Let me send him the invite real quick. That way he can get in here when he thinks he feels like it. That message is sent. Damn it. I did it again. Share audio. Because if I have to hear this shit again, you can't do it. Okay. So, what I want to point out, first of all, is the actual argument that we've been having for the last few hours. I missed it, obviously, but I turned around and watched it anyways, and needless to say, he's got some real nice mental gymnastics going for him. But this is the conversation so far. I was busy talking with G-Man Von and Lulu last night, but I agree with Ronan. You're doing this weird mental gymnastics thing to try to make the evidence fit for you, and it just doesn't cut the mustard. I'd like to see the evidence you have that specifically says the letters are associated with Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Otherwise, you're just adding that malarkey to fit your narrative. I figure I'd use some older words, that way you might actually understand them. His response is, it is matched up with the known histories of the people that were tested for their paternal and maternal family lineages. I thought that was explained, and of course he didn't actually explain it, he just asserted it. So I told him that, exactly that. So you didn't explain it, you asserted it. Where are the actual peer-reviewed papers that support your claim? His response is, it's genetic distance. Do you know what genetic distance is? So obviously he didn't feel like actually answering the question. So my response was, no, so non sequitur question aside, you're basically admitting that you to not having the evidence. Gotcha. The question I asked you has nothing to do with genetic distancing. I asked you for a peer-reviewed source showing that the letters associated with the mtDNA and Y chromosome data directly refer to Noah and family. So either cough up the source or admit that it was just an assertion. His response to that is, I'm saying the evidence is common knowledge at this point. You have the evidence of genetic, we have the evidence of genetic distance. Well, you have nothing. Genetic distance is the DNA data. So learn what it is before trying to talk about it. Ironic. My response to that was, if it's common knowledge, then why can't you post a source for it? And if your supposed evidence of genetic distance is the stuff that you've already been showing, or that you've already shown, that as Ronan and I have pointed out multiple times, then the evidence supports our view, not yours. And you've never shown anything linking the Y chromosome or mtDNA to the people that that allegedly stepped off the ark. That's what I want, because you've never shown anything supporting that claim. There's 3 requests. His response to that is, it never does any good to show you the data. That's why you have to learn what genetic distance is. It shows which family tree you belong to. A, B, C, D, and E are Hamitic. F, G, H, I, and J are Semitic. And basically K through S are Japhetic. The mtDNA results show the same trees. Okay, Jungle, one question I have for you real quick is, how in the hell are you, apparently Noah's nowhere on this list, so you kind of missed that in your narrative, but how in the hell are 3 people with 3 Y chromosomes going to end up with 20 different Y chromosomes? So, big plot hole in your narrative right there. And of course, the mtDNA results are similarly plot holed. My response to that was, it would serve you better to show the source in this case, because my claim is that you're making this stuff up. So showing a source would literally end my claim. But it seems like all you have is this weird assertion that only you seem to understand. I granted you, tentatively and for the sake of argument, that it was the case, and the last time we talked. I'm not doing that again, because not only do you fail utterly to provide support even when this is granted, you still have yet to explain how these 8 people could have all these different genetic markers with only 1 chromosome. So again, please cite your source for either the Y chromosome or mtDNA data being linked to these 8 people in a peer-reviewed article. Until then, I say you're full of crap. He proceeds to respond to that as, so you've already made up your mind that you're not going to learn what genetic distance is. So I replied to him about 20 minutes ago, or 19 minutes ago, if you want to be pedantic. Says, I've asked you 5 times for a source now that you claim is both common sense and allegedly easy to find, and you failed to deliver, either by trying to change the topic or ignoring the requests. So if you're so confident that you're right and not just playing pigeon chess, and to give you the example, pigeon chess is, arguing with an idiot is like playing chess with a pigeon, because all he's going to do is, no matter how well you play, all the pigeon is going to do is knock over the pieces, shit on the board, and strut around like you won anyways. Then I will gladly open up a room and invite you in to prove it to me. So the StreamYard's link has been sent. And I even give him permission to repost it on my channel or on his channel afterwards for bragging rights if he manages to somehow prove me wrong. So, going to that. We'll go ahead and share it.
Hello. I'm back doing DNA studies again. So let me get started here. Share screen. And where we go here? Oh, we had the Y chromosome, right?
Okay. This is the one that he seems to have the hugest issues with. Okay. This is a migration chart. Okay. If you look down here at the bottom where it says Y-DNA atom tree, tree Y-DNA atom, you start at Y-DNA atom, which happens to be a star on this one right over here in Western Africa. Okay. Jungle Jargon seems to think that, the cradle of humanity is somewhere over in Turkey, because that's where his Bible says that the ark landed. However, once again, when it comes to providing evidence, he provides this, which supports actual science. Okay. Humanity started at the star in Western Africa and spread out from there. The Y chromosomes mutated going all the way through to what we have today, or what we had. I believe this was in native population. So basically, before the white man moved from Europe back over into the States, or into the Americas. So, needless to say,
Dr. Nathaniel Jensen. Sorry for the noise. Dr. Nathaniel Jensen.
Yeah, Nathaniel Jensen. There's a real stalwart character of honesty and knowledge, as we learned from Standing for Truth's debate the other night, Standing for Truth's last debate. Dr. Nathaniel Jensen is one of these creationists that seems to think he's got scientific proof, and every time he shows it, it's absolute bullshit. Or he's got to twist the evidence to actually fit his narrative. So, great example, Jungle.
Jensen is doing a great job on Y chromosome studies around the world. He's been going through Asia, the Polynesia, Micronesia, Polynesia, and the Papua New Guineas, and things like that. And he touched on the, of course, the CY chromosome. In case you don't know what the CY chromosome is, oops, right here. Aborigines are C, Mongolians are C, and American Indians are C, all the way down to the northern tip of South America. They're C. CY chromosomes, possibly Nimrod, the descendants of Nimrod, who is a descendant of Ham. Besides that, they have the D. Dr. Nathaniel Jensen pointed out that the Andamanese on an island here are D. They're very dark skin colored, and we also have their descendants are way up here in Paleo Siberia.
Yeah, I'm going to point out real quick, if you look right here in the middle of the ocean where it says CFDE, okay, this right here is actually the CY chromosome and D chromosome in a migration route out of Africa. I don't understand how that's so hard to miss, but apparently it is.
It's D2. And we have them in Tibet and Burma, D1, D3. Of course, this is another descendant of Ham. Not sure who it is yet. I'm pretty sure the C would be Nimrod. So, and of course the D is found over up here in the Paleo-Siberian, the Joman, or Jaman, and the Japanese, Neo-Japanese Joman. Population, Dr. Jensen said it's about a third of the population of the Japanese. So, we're looking at that. So, but what I was wondering was,
I find it hilarious that I can play this thing on double time and he's still actually very easy to understand. Jungle, you've got a very, very slow way of actually talking, and I find it really easy to listen to when I play it back at high speed. So, yeah.
How did they get the if C is sort of a flat nose and Q is sort of a small nose, where did the big nosed Indians come from? As it turns out, if you look at the mitochondrial DNA, you might answer the question.
Now, this right here, he jumps from a migration chart to a population chart. That's not exactly an honest way of doing it, especially not without informing your viewers of that. But, you know, it's Jungle. So, yeah.
Because now all of this, I just verified that all of this is Semitic. The N would be NIWAXYRB FHVHVPJTUK. These would be all Semitic maternal lines. How do I know they're Semitic? Because when I go here to this Ashkenazi Jew DNA, what did I lose it? Oh, here it is. You'll find here an A, a B, and H. So where do we find A, B, and H? A is a Semitic line. B is a Semitic line. H is a Semitic line. Of course, a big population, big chunk is H. I don't know who's that, Rachel? Might be Rachel. Just guessing here. But. And then there's HV. Where's HV found? Right here, Semitic. And there's I and J, not to be confused with the Y chromosome I and J. I don't know why they have it so confusing, but I is right after N, so that's still Semitic. And J is Semitic too. And K, L, and M, and N. So we got K right here, L. Where's L? L, what we know L is African Hamite. So I mean, that was a K.
Okay. All of these different groups right here that he's showing, if you notice, all they are is just letters. Okay. I'm asking him for the source where he is making the assertion that these, the K and the L and the M are the wives of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, because he also does the same shit with the guys, as you saw earlier. So this is the question that I challenged him on.
L and M. And the M, we know the M is the Japhethite right here. So we have the L and the M, which are not Semitic.
This is an mtDNA chart. How is that a Japhethite?
Mitochondrial DNA in the Ashkenazi group. So the L and the M are not Semitic. N, of course, is Semitic. And the R and the T are both Semitic. And the U.
Again, he's still looking at mtDNA. That would be the women.
And the V. So it'd be the U and the V are Semitic. And the W and the X. So we have the X and the W are Semitic. So the only ones that are not Semitic would be the L and the M, which is, kind of strongly suggesting that all of this in here is Semitic. And of course, even if these aren't all represented in the Ashkenazi or the Jewish people, they're still Semitic of one kind or another, because Semitic is not just Abraham. We have the Gypsies and the Dravidians, they're Semitic. So we have more than that. But it does suggest that, especially with this H here, very large population of H, which is 25% or so. The H. Okay, HV is pretty big. 25.91%. HV is 5%. Okay, so it's a big chunk right there. My mtDNA would be H3G. So that's my mtDNA. Not mine, but my mother's mtDNA. But since I have an X chromosome, one X chromosome, one Y chromosome, I have the mitochondrial. That'd be from my mother, right? I guess. Anyway, so the X and the Y. And so that pretty much, so the thing I wanted to point out here is that according to the the fantasy of evolution paradigm, they have everybody, it doesn't show it here, but they have everybody
He means fact.
being descended from Africans. But
but look, now that he zoomed in, if you look right there, that's a big star to be ignoring.
order that they have it is that they have the Africans, from the Africans descended the Semites, from the Semites descended the Japhethites. When you look at the mitochondrial DNA, they have it in this order, the reverse order. From the Africans, which is L1, 2, and 3, you have the Japhethite women descended from the Africans first, and then from the Japhethite women, they have the Semitic N descending from the Japhethite women. So they have it mixed up. How can you have the Y chromosomes descending first the Africans, then the Semitics, and then the Japhethites, and then the mitochondrial you have the Africans, the Japhethites, and then the Semitics? That just debunks the out of Africa belief right then and there. Mic drop. So, of course, this is not new to us, because look at this. See this Uzbekistan thing here? See everybody represented here? Same thing would be here. If we go to this mtDNA, is this it? Yeah, this is Y chromosome, right? You go to the Y chromosome. You have see the Uzbekistan again. See this huge variety here.
Again, he's using a population chart instead of an actual migration chart or anything like that. This is a population chart of a set time period, which was, I believe, right here at the bottom says situation before the recent European expansion. So this would be like 1400s, something like that. Okay. So he seems to think that, according to this, you have to look at the pie chart with the most colors in it. The problem is if that were the case, this Uzbekistan one that he's running right now, there seems to be a severe lack of that light blue color in there that happens to be in Africa. And as a matter of fact, it doesn't look like there's any white in there, which is the southern Africa. So if they started there, how did they spread out? Because they didn't. This is the correct answer there.
In this area. Of course, this is where the ark landed. modern Turkey's over here, but the cradle of civilization is in here somewhere. I mean, it's this way. It's on. See, this is the Arabian Peninsula here. This is Middle East here. I mean, Israel here, and over here is the cradle of civilization, where the ark landed, near where the ark landed. Ark landed up here somewhere. But anyways, you have a huge variety of people in this area of the Y chromosome. Same thing with the mtDNA. Uzbekistan again, huge variety of people of the mtDNA concentrated in this area, this whole area. And of course, they spread out from here. Blues, light blues went this way. These greens went this way. These light purples went this way. The dark purples went this way. Or is that the same thing? Anyway, but they spread out from here. And of course, with the mtDNA, the L1, 2, and 3 all went to Africa and stayed in Africa. Always L1, L2, and L3s. The mitochondrial DNA went to Africa and stayed in Africa and are not represented here. But when you go to the Y chromosome, you have the Hamitic A, B, C, D, and E. A, B, C, D, and E. In Africa, you only have the A, B, and the E represented.
Yeah, that's because, Jungle, I really hate to do this to you, man.
I keep trying to say that.
The star is Y-DNA atom. Okay, I really think that you don't understand the concept of the most recent common ancestor. Okay, when we say Y-DNA atom, we mean the last person that is related to all of us, or the most recent person that is related to all of us. Okay, Y-DNA atom had a father. Okay, he had brothers. This is not a set in stone thing. Okay, when we're using genetics like this, you still have to obey the law of superstructure. The mutations that are in the Y chromosome that were laid down before the more recent mutations are the ones that are the older. And that literally means that Y-DNA atom is the oldest mutation.
That there's a D somewhere here, but the only D that I can see in Africa is this dotted line, which is an imaginary migration route of the DE and the C.
Hypothetical migration route, not imaginary. And on top of that, the reason why that line is drawn there is because it corresponds to reality, which is something that you don't seem to know a whole lot about.
D. So C. So obviously the C went this way, but I think the C is Nimrod. The D, I'm not sure which one it is, but I know the E is probably Mitzrayim. And then you have the A and the B. But because of the large genetic distance of certain African tribes, they extrapolate that to mean that they're an older lineage. But what it really amounts to is a faster reproductive rate. So,
no, it does not mean that it's an older tribe. I just explained it, but I'll do it again. The reason why the out of Africa hypothesis holds water is because of the way the if you want to call them ERVs or SNPs, or I believe that's what they were. Basically, the little gene mutations that are in the Y chromosome itself, they literally follow in order. Okay, I mean, this is like saying, okay, my mother is also a mutt, but her father was pureblood Puerto Rican. Okay. Going by your theory, because you're apparently only paying attention to the Y chromosome, obviously her father did not pass his Y chromosome to her, which means she didn't pass it to me. By your own logic, that means that I have 0% Puerto Rican in me. It doesn't work that way.
So yeah, I was listening to Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, and
again, there was your mistake.
And he was going through this. First, he started talking about the languages. I'm not too much interested in the languages, although it's interesting. I mean, I like languages. And he gets into the DNA here.
You notice he was talking about Nathaniel Jensen, and he brings up a Ken Ham site.
The Australian Aborigines. And it's not just Australia where Europeans encounter folks who look much different from them. It's Papua New Guinea.
Oh, sorry. That was my mistake. I just noticed that Jensen is actually in the live stream with Ken Ham, or in the video with Ken Ham. So, my mistake.
They look different. And of course, Polynesia, Micronesia have a much more Asian look. None of these people have European looks. And to look at more modern examples, again, these people today look nothing like Europeans. If we didn't know any better, we might look at some of these Polynesians and wonder if they didn't have any Asian connection. Is the obvious physical similarities. Well, why would we talk about any of this if our larger question is the question of the origin of the first peoples of the Americas? Well, why would we talk about it? these sorts of peoples. Obviously, there's a physical connection between some of the Polynesians, and you can see obvious physical resemblances between Polynesians and today's Native Americans. But as we've discovered in the series, today's Native Americans are the product of a more recent migration, and they underwent a major population collapse. East Asia didn't undergo such a major population collapse where maybe 90% of people died out. There was Black Death in Asia at some point, but China is still over 1 billion people strong. Among the natives of the Pacific, there is evidence for population collapse there due to similar reasons. Europeans coming over, perhaps inadvertently bringing diseases to which the natives were not resistant, and so some of them died out as well. And this has the consequence of obscuring some of their history. So what is the history of Pacific, Papua New Guinea, and Australia before the arrival of Europeans? And might it reveal some connections to early America? Last episode, we looked at 3 major disciplines of science to look for clues to a different question: the history of those who arrived in the early AD era. Could we glean something from these same 3 fields?
Yeah, I want to skip the languages.
There's a subgrouping here that joins Madagascar, Indonesia, and Philippines. There's subgroupings that join Pacific Islands, subgroupings here and here. Notice that they skirt Papua New Guinea, avoid Australia. And these linguistic groupings roughly fit the major divisions we looked at earlier. Micronesia, Polynesia are joined linguistically, but they're separate from Melanesia by and large, Papua New Guinea and Australia. And they tend to roughly fit these physical different groupings. Polynesians obviously look like this. This is a Maori girl from New Zealand, and she has a more Asian look. The Melanesians, like the Papua New Guineans, the Aboriginal Australians, have a much more, I'd say, an African look with darker skin and very tight curly hair. These sort of language groupings and linguistic data have been combined with archaeology by mainstream scientists to come up with a model for the settling of the Pacific. There was a resettling momentarily. Just based on linguistics, there's a bunch of different deep language families in New Guinea. There's a deep linguistic origin for Australia, and this seems to fit this relative Papua New Guineans and Melanesians first, and then the Austronesians and Polynesians later. What about genetics, though? This is where it gets very interesting, and they illumine potential connections to the early Americas. Let's begin with this study. Notice that they don't sample any groups in the Pacific again because of where the people are. And historically, again, this has been neglected because there haven't been that many people in the Pacific. So instead, we're going to turn to this study, which does sample. So this particular study tried to get as broad an ethnic sampling of the globe, but perhaps a shallow look. There's more Southeast Asian groups, there's Filipino groups, there's New Guinea groups. We'll talk about this as well as some of the other groups from other studies. We're just going to begin here, though. And what I want us to look at first, notice I've colored groups from Oceania in dark purple. We want to find spots on this tree where the dark purple peoples are, and there's 2 spots. If you're able to look close, you might not see it based on the level of zooming I have here. There's a group up here, and there's a group down here. I'm going to begin with the upper ones. And you might recall from previous episodes that we've been assigning letters and names and such, which seems somewhat arbitrary to these various groups, but there is a method to this madness. Mainstream scientists have a system to doing it. We've talked about how the very deep branches in the tree get assigned, first of all, a letter of the alphabet, an uppercase letter of the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, so forth. Then, if these very deep branches break up into subgroups, you assign a number. So we talked about the group R and group R1, R2, and then if that gets broken up into groups, R1A, R1D, so it's letters, numbers, and so forth. That's the system that they have for assigning.
And this is the Y chromosome, of course.
And what we see here is that there's so many deep groupings in the Pacific, they're assigned separate letters. There's S, there's K, there's M. In Europe, we talk about R1b, a very specific subgrouping being dominant in Western Europe. In the Pacific alone, in Papua New Guinea, you have multiple deep branchings, and they're assigned these separate letters.
There's a genetic
And
distance.
Dr. Jensen, just to clarify here for those that may not have seen some of the previous episodes, this is all based on research conducted on differences and similarities in the Y chromosome inherited through the male, correct?
Exactly. This is Y chromosome based, and this tree is reconstructed based on how many differences and similarities. So when I say there's a deep branching, it means there are huge differences in the Y chromosome, the male inherited DNA between, if we can zoom in here momentarily just to see who these people are, the Kosipi, the dark purple Papua New Guineans. The Agta are people from the Philippines. The Aita are from the Philippines. Lebo and Baho are also close by, just put them on the map here, in Indonesia. So even though they're geographically close, they have tremendous genetic differences among them. There's a huge number of Y chromosome differences, even though they're geographically very close. Physically, the Papua New Guineans, of course, have this, what I'm going to say is a sort of an African look with dark skin, African-like features and hair and nose and lips and such. Indonesians, many of them have more of an Asian look. Well, the Filipinos do as well, yet the specific Filipino peoples that we looked at are called Negrito groups because they have an African appearance to them. They're a small minority in the Philippines, but there are dark-skinned, curly-haired people in the Philippines. That's who these Agta and Aita peoples are, and they're right next to on the tree, these Indonesians. And when I say next to, it's a very deep next to. They're next to geographically, yet they don't have these common ancestors until pre-1000 BC, which is remarkable. So geographically close, they're neighbors, yet genetically on this Y chromosome tree, the differences are enormous and indicate a very deep ancient history, which again seems to fit what we've been discussing.
Which is a large genetic distance.
So according to this, let's see here, before 3000 BC over here, I don't buy that. Let's see, we got Hawaiians, AD 900, really? See, this is why we ask you guys, for some reason you don't believe in evolution, but yet you believe in this weird hyper evolution that is going to get these gigantic, vast differences in less time. And it doesn't work that way.
Distance is a number of mutations between the lines. So there's a lot. Large genetic distance means there's a lot of mutations, a large number of mutations between the groups.
Archaeologically, the settlement of the Pacific, the Polynesian settlement, happens late in history. The Melanesian settlement, and notice that these arrows pass through Indonesia, happens very early. So that's where we're at so far. Now, it raises some questions. Why do we have lighter-skinned, Asian-looking peoples as part of this ancient text? I thought linguistically Indonesia was tied to Madagascar over here, to the Pacific Islands and Polynesians. Why would they have this deep heritage? Well, if you look at some of the peoples of Indonesia, you might notice that they seem to have what could be perhaps African-looking Papua New Guinea type features. This is one particular tribe in Indonesia.
I don't want to say it looks like a former president of the United States, but
these 3 gentlemen are all part of the same tribe.
Ooh, shout out Obama. Yeah, that's for sure.
look carefully at their faces, there's some significant differences. There's diversity even within the single Indonesian tribe. Look at his eyes. Look how East Asian they appear. Look at the noses and the lips of these gentlemen. Are those African in origin? I'm going to show you 2 slides now in which I keep the lady on the left, who's Chinese, and the gentleman on the right, who's Papua New Guinean, the same. But the middle person is going to be an Indonesian in each case, but a different Indonesian. There are some Indonesians who bear obvious resemblance to East Asia. Not identical. Obviously, his nose, his lips are different from this lady's facial structure, but his eyes, his skin tone look East Asian. Yet there are other Indonesians who, if we didn't know any better, look like they're a mix
We didn't
of
know any
perhaps Asian
better.
features and yet have strong
Look like
resemblances,
someone
nose,
we
lips,
know.
and such, perhaps skin tone to the Papua New Guinean. Well, that's not accidental, I don't think. We've looked so far at one of the genetic branches that show up in Papua New Guinea. Now I want to look at another one that might give us some hints as to why these physical similarities.
Okay, I'm going to pause it right here. This is a Y. This is the blown up version of the Y chromosome haplogroup chart. Okay. Apparently, this is supposedly between 2500 BC and 1990. Okay. I can give that an extra 10 years, call it 2000. So you've got 4,500 years. And supposedly that's Noah. I honestly don't know. I mean, if you're
These differences exist in people groups that are geographically very close. So let's move our attention now down to here. Purple shows up down here, this deep purple that I'm labeling Oceania. This is part of a larger group that we call Group C. So again, it's a different letter because it's got a deep connection. Group C has a diversity of peoples on it. Let's zoom in.
And you should know who Group C is. Group C is probably Nimrod. He's a descendant of Ham. He's a Hamite.
And see who they are, and then look at their connections and see what this means historically. Notice that, again, this royal blue indicates East Asian, Southeast Asian. You might not recognize these names. Marut is Indonesian. Aita, again, are these Negrito, African-looking peoples in the Philippines. Lebo is Indonesian. What's this? This is light green. This is South Asian. India and such. There's an Indian person that shows up in this lineage. In fact, there's a whole group of South Asians that have a deep connection in this Group C. Dusun and Baho are again Indonesians. There's the purple.
And those would probably be the link to India, where they said that a lot of Aborigines have a link to India.
And if we go down here on these branches, pink is Siberia. There's a whole bunch of Siberian groups. Light green is Central Asian. So you might not recognize these names. Just recognize that they're pink.
And that would be the Mongolians.
They're Siberian. Kazakhs, you might recognize that name, Central Asian. There's this big Siberian branch that's part of the tree.
There you go, Mongolians.
Now, the date, and again, you can see here, there's a big deep blue branch, a deep green branch, blue. The Papua New Guineans show up here again. If we brought in data from other studies, you can see there would be deep Australian Aborigine branches here. There's a deep Siberian branch. This splitting up happens around 800 BC. Now again, depending on where we put Noah, that date changes some. The point is it happens after the dates we saw in this other branch. It seems to be the second diversification event, which may have some echo in what can refer to in the Australian Aboriginal legends or people here before. Well, what does this mean? How can we understand these deep branching events? So again, notice what's happening here. Around 800 BC, or sometime in the distant past, there's a South Asian lineage that emerges. There's a Southeastern Asian lineage, Indonesian lineage that emerge. If we had more other groups that we brought together, the Australian Aborigine and Papua New Guinean lineages that emerge. There's a Siberian lineage that emerges. So let's put these on the map, combining this study along with others around.
And of course, the sea goes all the way to the Americas and down through the Americas all the way to the northern tip of South America.
Around 800 BC, after the settling of Papua New Guinea and Australian Aborigines, there's a diversification event. We have an ancient lineage that shows up in Siberia and Central Asia. If we brought another data, you'd see a Japanese lineage. You'd see again Southeast Asian, Papua New Guinean, Aborigine, the South Asian. So it appears to be a migration event where these groups spread out, and these lineages appear then to be restricted. After they split, there's a lineage that seems to be restricted to Japan, restricted to Siberia and Central Asia, restricted to India, restricted. They spread out and then take up the roots, spread out, and then plant new roots elsewhere in these locations. So what in the world is going on here? Who's the one who's spreading out? Where do these people come from, and why do they end up in these locations? Looking at how the geography is spread out here, does it mean that there's a Filipino group, Indonesian group that's spreading out in all directions? Do you take the bullseye center and attribute it that way, so that there's a second group that then moves into Australia and Papua New Guinea? I want to take a deeper look at this. Again, this study doesn't sample any groups in the Pacific, but it does have people who are in Group C. I'm bringing up this study because it also has people in Group D, which are close by. In this particular study, Group D is a very strong echo, and in the study, the only echo in Japan. I think it's about a third of Japan. And when I had this study in hand, I thought it was just must be an ancient Japanese lineage. But lo and behold, if you look more broadly in the globe, and especially at some of these neglected minority groups, there is a group of people in the Andaman Islands. You've probably never heard of these before. Once you study South Asian history, they belong, I think, to India. The great Andamanese peoples do not look like Indians, like South Asians. They look like Africans. They're very dark-skinned, dark-haired, curly-haired. They look like African peoples, and they show up. So they're nearly extinct. The males that we've been able to sample show up in Group D. They share a common ancestor with the Japanese people, and they share a common ancestor around the same time that we saw this migration event in Group C. So what in the world is going on here? Let's add this to the map. I'm going to color them purple because they have this obvious physical resemblance to peoples right here. So you have, in ancient times, something that's probably never documented in history, but from genetics we have an event for some dispersal of peoples, not the Babel dispersal. This is after that. This is at least 1,000 years after that, and at least 1,000 years after the initial settling of Papua New Guinea and Australia.
The Babel dispersal. So somehow, in 1,000 years, these people had suddenly started speaking other languages while right in the middle of building a tower. And let's see here before I misrepresent it. I mean, how did creationists think that the Tower of Babel actually happened? I mean, was it like, hey, hand me that hammer, and then turn around and they grab the hammer and try to say this one, but it comes out in Chinese, and then they start screaming at each other in Russian. And I mean, how does that actually work? Because languages don't evolve like that. They don't work like that at all. And I mean, this is just kind of ridiculous. But even bearing that in mind, even trying to give you the benefit of the doubt on that one, it still doesn't hold water. I'm sorry, this is just.
So what in the world is going on here? In this study, there. And from my perspective, if you look at the distribution of sub-Saharan Africans in these lineages, so the zoomed out scenario, but I'm doing this because I want you to see that C and D are almost swallowed up in sub-Saharan Africa. You could make the case that they look like they're African descendants. Again.
Okay, and the C and the D aren't in Africa. The C and the D went the other way. They never went towards Africa. They're not represented in Africa or near Africa.
Swallowed up in sub-Saharan Africa. You could make the case that they look like they're African descendants. Again, there. And from my perspective, if you look at the distribution of sub-Saharan Africans in these lineages, so the zoomed out scenario, but I'm doing this because I want you to see that C and D are, go to this study, again, I mentioned you can find, even though you don't have the Papua New Guineans and such, you do have people that are part of groups C and D, and you have a much better sampling of Africa. So group C and D show up there, sub-Saharan Africa shows up there, and only there. And from my perspective, if you look at the distribution of sub-Saharan Africans in these lineages, so the zoomed out scenario, but I'm doing this because I want you to see that C and D are almost swallowed up in sub-Saharan Africa. You could make the case that they look like they're African descendants. Again.
C and D are swallowed up by sub-Saharan Africa. So let's see. Jungle decided to jump through some mental hoops to make this fit his narrative.
Okay, and the C and the D aren't in Africa. The C and the D went the other way. They never went towards Africa. They're not represented in Africa or near Africa. That's why I think that C might be Nimrod, who was like in Babylon or somewhere. And Mitzrayim went to Africa. Mitzrayim settled Africa with his mother, whose name.
We're talking about the Y chromosome, Jungle. You don't have to mention the women.
Was Egyptus. So, and all the Hamite women went and settled in Africa and stayed there. So, but the C and the D never appears in Africa.
Okay. By any normal science, C and D wouldn't have to appear in Africa. C and D would have added mutations off of B, which does appear in Africa. Okay. I don't want to have to take credit for this every time I have to say it, but evolution involves sex. Okay. This is not the same people having their Y chromosome mutate during their lifetimes. This is people passing their Y chromosome off, possibly with a mutation, to their children.
Beginning to show up in S, K, and N up here. So I would argue that genetically there's definitely evidence for an initial very early settling of Papua New Guinean Australian Aborigines. But could there be a second settling? Again, we've looked at in group C a distribution. It seems to be in 800 AD, C and D. There's something that happens where people spread out all across South, East, North Asia, as well as into the Pacific. So what's going on? Is this an Indonesian group that spreads out? Could this be dark-skinned peoples, African people, who moved into Africa and then decided to move back out of Africa and keep going?
Yeah, he's saying something like they moved out of Africa, but I don't think they ever even went to Africa because they're not represented anywhere near Africa.
So now he's calling his credible source a liar. I find that funny.
When we think about these ethnic or so-called racial components, remember again, the Pacific Australian Aborigines, historically, at least in a traditional sense, have been viewed as people poor. They've always been a very small part of the global world population. And if you think about what we discussed in episodes 3 and 4, where ethnic change can happen faster than we think about, and about the math of reproductive growth, these dark-skinned peoples have historically been very few in number. So let's think about it. One hypothesis. Is this ancient migration of 800 BC that they're spreading out? Could it be a dark-skinned peoples? Well, if it was a migration of dark-skinned peoples from the Pacific, a region of the globe where they've always been few in number, what we're talking about most likely then would be a migration of a small number of people into South Asia, East Asia, Siberia, Japan, where they're probably the minority population. And based on the genetics that we discussed in episodes 3 and 4, their descendants would probably not look dark-skinned and dark-haired. They'd blend into the dominant population. Yet they could end up leaving genetically descendants in which their heritage is obviously coming from the Pacific. My point.
And if you notice, a lot of the Indonesians and the people who may not even look African, may not even have darker skin, but they do still have some African features like the nose and the lips, like you were saying.
If this is a migration of dark-skinned peoples in 800 BC, and I'm suspicious that it is, you would not see dark-skinned peoples in these other regions of the globe because simple math. However, you could still see this heritage being dark-skinned. Here's another geographic clue I want to bring into the equation. Again, dark-skinned peoples, I've been using the term African. Dark-skinned people show up heavily in sub-Saharan Africa. Well, how interesting is that? Each of these peoples, here, and I'm talking about the Negrito, the Aita, the Agta peoples who look like Africans, and here, all of these dark-skinned, dark-haired peoples, and also over here, not only do they share some morphological similarities, they all have ancient lineages. I mentioned that this S and K and N lineages exist in Papua New Guinea. And my guess is actually that, so here you've got dark-skinned peoples, the Ata and Agta here. This is dark-skinned, this is dark-skinned, this is dark-skinned. I'm suspicious that these Indonesians, even though they may look light-skinned, are probably the result of intermixing. I mean, right.
Okay, notice he's talking about these are dark-skinned, but their P and S are Japhethites. They're not Hamites, the Y chromosome. So these people in these areas were influenced or by the dark-skin color of the Hamites, even though the Y chromosome is Japhethite.
Papua New Guinea. So my guess is these are probably light-skinned, but originally Papua New Guinean peoples. They have a very ancient lineage. The Andamanese peoples are part of this ancient migration event. You can ask the question, are these originally dark-skinned peoples who make their way into Japan, or originally Japanese Asian peoples who make their way into the Great Andaman Islands? I'm suspicious
They're also represented in Tibet and Burma too as well.
that it's the former, that it's dark-skinned peoples who eventually make their way into Japan, so that some Japanese peoples actually have dark-skinned heritage. Same thing then for India and Indonesia and Siberia. My suspicion is these are dark-skinned peoples originally. This is an ancient dark-skinned lineage that spreads out, and then today, because of just the math and the genetics that we discussed, look Asian or Indian, or so forth. Again, they're swallowed up in sub-Saharan Africa. We'll talk about in future episodes how Africa also has a very ancient genetic lineage. How intriguing that these regions of the globe, the Andaman Islands, some of the Filipinos, again, the dark-skinned ones, New Guinea, Australia, sub-Saharan Africa, all of these have a certain morphological tie-in, physical similarity, and they have an ancient genetic heritage. And also, they exist at a similar latitude.
Check this out. He's going to point something out interesting about some South American people, which were there, but they're not there today. But they left carvings.
So here's a narrative hypothesis that seems to be emerging. Could all of these connections, genetically and physical, be due to a lot of early migration activity? Whatever the exact explanation is, we know, first of all, that there's ancient lineages in these spots, and there is a lot of ancient migration activity. Regardless of what the actual origin of this activity is, there's a lot of movement going on in the ancient past more than we ever thought. Could it be that there were, after Babel, some people moving down into Africa, some people moving here, and maybe after Babel, some people continuing to move this direction? But what's to stop them from continuing to move eastward? If there were people that went this way, and then went this way, and we know there's a lot of migration happening, what's to stop these dark-skinned peoples from continuing their migrations in the eastward direction? Well, if they did that, that would bring them to the shores of the Americas. The earliest peoples are the Olmecs that we find archaeological evidence for, not necessarily a household name, but their carvings are something our viewers might be familiar with. How intriguing that the physical features on these carvings, look at the shape of the nose, the eyes, the lips, seem to find an echo in modern day Indonesia. And I've argued that some of these Indonesians look like they're the product of mixing between Asian groups and Papua New Guineans. And Papua New Guineans being some of the earliest. After the Olmecs come the Mayans. They have a BC era origin archaeologically, a late BC, shortly before the time of Christ, and of course continue into the AD era. Based on their carvings, to me they look like they have more of the Asian look.
Okay, this is what was bothering me, or I was trying to figure out was how did these native South Americans and even North Americans come to have a nose like that, which is fairly large and seems to have a bend in it. And that's when I looked at the mtDNA and I saw that in the Americas you have represented are Semitic. The U here is Semitic. The red, the B, is Semitic. The blue is not. The blue is Japhethite, the M. And this darker color here is Japhethite too. So, but there is a strong influence here of this red and this light purple color, whatever it is, which could be the reason for the influence of the Semitic nose. And that's probably where it comes from. Because ever since I was in South America a long time ago, I always knew that in South America there's two kinds of indigenous people. There's the Native American Indians with a smaller nose, and then there's Native American Indians with a larger nose. So there's two different kinds of influence, but it doesn't come from the Hamitic line, and it doesn't come from the Japhethite line. So it comes from the mitochondrial DNA line. So that was interesting to me. I can find out where I'm at.
This particular carving. And I bring up the carvings because we have to remember, and we have to get out of our minds, the image we have of today's Native Americans, because the physical features.
Okay, these are American Indians with large, Semitic type noses, and these people. I mean, this kind of appearance here is also represented in some of the indigenous people in South America, as well.
Possess are the product of a later migration event. They're going to echo their Asian origin, and they're mixing perhaps with the peoples who were here first. So whatever features they have are not necessarily the features that the earliest Americans have. That's why I'm emphasizing these carvings. Who did these people come from? Could it be that the builders of these monuments came from peoples like this? Could these be how the first Americans looked? It's a very intriguing hypothesis, and we'll talk about in future episodes some genetic tools we could use to explore it. At the moment.
And I think he's going to talk next time about the European Y chromosome, which will be interesting too. So what we got? We got Ronan Wildheart. I didn't mean to neglect y'all. Hope you're not too disinterested. Let me see. So does everybody like the class so far? Let's see.
No, not really. This is the third time I've sat through it.
Is there anything that anybody would like to add to that or discuss maybe? If you're still awake. JJ watched the Ken Ham video. That was your first mistake. The Ken Ham video. I like Ken Ham. I had breakfast with him one time. Ronan, I'm interested in sharing my perspective about the video.
Oh, yes. adding that you had breakfast with him one time is just kind of like nails on a chalkboard at this point, because the fact that you give Ken Ham any respect at all is ridiculous. He's between him and Hovind, he's one of the worst things for your religion that you could possibly happen. They are both crooks. One just happens to be convicted. Anyways, from what I'm looking at here, this Nathaniel Jensen Answers Research Journal, apparently somebody gave him a response. Stephen Frello, a PhD biologist and evolutionist, previously wrote a formal critique of Replacing Darwin, which apparently is one of Jensen's books. And I responded to his criticisms. In our first exchange over the claims of replacing Darwin, I documented the fact that Frello's objections fell far short of the type of scientific critique that might reveal real flaws in my analysis. Specifically, I documented the fact that Frello avoided directly engaging the main points of the book. I also showed that his criticisms failed to uncover errors in replacing Darwin, because Frello's objections generally amounted to nothing more than the statements of a tested hypothesis as fact, or misrepresentations of claims in replacing Darwin. Surprisingly, in some cases, Frello's attempted objections actually helped underscore my point. This second critique primarily responds to my published rejoinders. Since we're past the first stage of our exchange, I recognize the difficulty that readers might have in following the sentence of statements in each paper. To case this challenge, I will be reprinting Frello's most recent critiques in full in small capitals, with my responses interspersed throughout. Okay, so this is apparently his version of the guy's response to his response. So, yeah, this should be a very nice and honest review. Let's see if we can't find a more honest review. Let me Google this guy's name real quick and see if I can find the actual response. Let's see here, something besides Answers in Genesis, because, yeah, that's not a reliable source. Facebook's not exactly a reliable source either. Nothing yet. Sorry, I'm having to pop back and forth on my screens here because I'm still waiting for Jungle Jargon to get in here, who seems to have gone suspiciously quiet. Let's see here. Okay, well, I can't really find it again, but at the same time, I do have something that I can post again. Let's see here. What is that called? There it is. Give me just a second. Share screen again. Okay, just want to point this up here again. Now, Nathaniel Jensen works for Answers in Genesis. Answers in Genesis. I'm going to point out it's called the Statement of Faith. In order to preserve the function and integrity of the ministry in its mission to proclaim the absolute truth and authority of Scripture and to provide a biblical role model to our employees and to the church, the community, and society at large, it is imperative that all persons employed by the ministry in any capacity or who serve as volunteers should abide by and agree to our statement of faith to include the statement on marriage and sexuality and conduct themselves accordingly. Section 1, the scientific aspect of creationism are important, but are secondary in importance to the proclamation of the gospel of Jesus Christ as sovereign creator, redeemer, and judge. You know, the last time I checked, the son wasn't the creator; that was the dad. So you guys kind of missed that mark right there. The doctrines of creator and creation cannot ultimately be divorced from the gospel of Jesus Christ. Yeah, I thought this was called the Answers in Genesis. Since when is Jesus in Genesis? 66 books of the Bible were the written word of God. The Bible is divinely inspired and inerrant throughout. Its assertions are factually true in all the original autographs. It is the supreme authority in everything it teaches. Its authority is not limited to spiritual, religious, or redemptive themes, but includes its assertions in such fields as history and science. The final guide of the interpretations of Scripture is Scripture itself. The account of origins presented in Genesis is a simple but factual presentation of actual events and therefore provides a reliable framework for scientific research into the question of the origin and history of life, mankind, the earth, and the universe. The various original life forms, kinds, including mankind, were made by direct creative acts of God. The living descendants of any of the original kinds, apart from man, because man's apparently so special, may represent more than one species today, reflecting the genetic potential within the original kind. Only limited biological changes, including mutational deterioration, have occurred naturally within each kind since creation. The Great Flood of Genesis was an actual historical event, worldwide, global in its extent and effect. The special creation of Adam, the first man, and Eve, the first woman, and their subsequent fall into sin is the basis for the necessity of salvation for mankind. Death, both physical and spiritual, and bloodshed enters into this world subsequent to and is a direct consequence of man's sin. Well, this is a lot of bullshit. Okay, hold on a sec. Theology, God is triune, one God, three persons. The kind that doesn't make sense. All mankind are sinners inherently from Adam and individually by choice, and are therefore subject to God's wrath and condemnation. I'm sorry. Why would you worship something that tells you you're a piece of shit and you need His miracle cure to be saved? I mean, this is. Hey. Okay, this is what I was wanting anyways. The following is held by members of the board of Answers in Genesis to be either consistent with Scripture or implied by Scripture. Scripture teaches a recent origin for man and the whole creation, spanning approximately 4,000 years from creation to Christ. Okay, so 4,000 BC. This is our timeline. These people think that the world is 6,000 years old. 6,005 years old, apparently. Something like that. Anyways, that's not important. The thing is we have trees on this planet older than that. Okay? This doesn't work for me. Now, the days in Genesis do not correspond to geologic ages, but are 6 consecutive 24-hour days of creation. The Noachian flood was a significant geological event, and much, if not all, fossiliferous sediment originated at that time. The gap theory has no basis in Scripture. The view commonly used to evade the implications or the authority of biblical teachings that knowledge and or truth may be divided into secular and religious is rejected. So apparently they think they own science. And by definition, no apparent, perceived, or claimed evidence in any field, including history and chronology, can be valid if it contradicts the scriptural record. Of primary importance is the fact that evidence is always subject to interpretation by fallible people who do not possess all information. Oh, so they've added some presuppositionalism in it since the last time I bothered looking at this thing. Okay, so this is a statement of faith. This is a statement of faith that Dr. Nathaniel Jensen has been forced to sign for working in Answers in Genesis. The statement of faith specifically says, by definition, evidence that says anything that contradicts the Bible is no longer evidence. Okay, so it's literally either the Bible's right or your science is wrong. And as we know, science doesn't work that way. Science does not give a damn about your feelings. Okay, what was it that, yeah, one of these unimportant YouTubers. Yeah, so, you know, facts don't care about your fifis. But it's now been almost an hour since I went live. So I have a feeling that Jungle Jargon probably won't be in here. I'll go ahead and leave this video up, though. I find it hilarious, though. We had essentially an argument spanning over the course of 11 hours while I was in a live stream earlier. And yet, when I finally turn around and tell him that I will gladly open up a room and let him come in here and prove me wrong, suddenly he's busy. So, I'm not going to call him a coward, but I will say he's wrong because he still hasn't presented any evidence. Oh, yeah, let's share this for a little bit because I know I like Ronan. Ronan's always fun. So we'll go back to this.
Okay, this will be okay. Well, maybe I'll let you get. Let me get my here.
Hello, how you doing?
Okay, right there.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay, I can hear you now. I can hear you.
Okay, let's get into it. The last part of the video you were showing, you showed American Indians. Okay, do you understand? Okay, the point being is the fathers of those Indians migrated to North and South America 40,000 years before Columbus landed in the West Indies. Okay, now over time,
40,000 years. No, that's not what the.
No, wait
that's
a
not what the
minute.
genetic distance is.
I'm out. You presented your representation of human migration. I'm representing the scientific knowledge.
There is a genetic distance you have to deal with.
Excuse me. I'm representing.
Go ahead.
I'm representing the genetic knowledge carried forth by science. What you have is something by the Ken Ham grouping of people who believe otherwise. You said you were going to hear me out, but you keep interrupting me.
Oh,
I'm having fun at your expense right now.
It's okay.
Like doing these voices, trying to be patient with you.
Go ahead.
40,000 years ago, the fathers of those American Indians that were displayed in the video migrated. Now the thing is,
which one? The Polynesian ones? The Polynesian ones that came from over here.
Over 40,000 years, the people that settled in those regions of the Americas, North and South. No, oh man, I love this. North and South. They adapted to the environment because it is hot, because it is dry, like because it may be hot and moist for that matter.
Over here,
the human nose adapted over time. Imagine Icelanders or Nordic people; they have smaller noses. There's a lot more oxygen where they were living, and it was cold, so they needed less air. So the nose, over generations, adapted to the environment, becoming smaller in size.
That's an idea.
And the difference in American Indian versus like the Jewish faith is adaptation over time.
But
Okay.
you don't see the influence of the Semitic nose in the American Indians?
I see some influence, but not a direct connection, because we're talking the science of environment and adaptation to
That's why I showed you
environment.
That's why I showed you the Semitic DNA, or the
Again.
mitochondrial DNA in here.
Well, again, the graphics you had showed prior put Adam in in Africa, Central Africa, and the migration pattern started from there. Genetics has already proven what I'm sharing with you. Okay, they went through and actually took DNA samples of a bunch of people from all over the world and figured out the migration pattern over time of the human species.
But you know, there's Hamitic and Semitic and Japhethites, right?
Okay, but that's your interpretation. I'm not saying it is wrong. I'm saying I disagree with your position based on the science that I understand.
The same thing is here with the Africans here. The Hamitic is here, L1, 2, 3.
No, the Africans were first.
But then they mixed it up. If that's the case, let me just show you this. Because over here, they have first the Africans, then the Semitics, and then the Japhethites. But over here, in the mitochondria, they have the Africans, the Japhethites, and then the Semitic women.
Okay.
Maternal line. So that doesn't even make sense. How can over here the Semitics be descended from the Africans, and then the Japhethites be descended from the Semitics, and then over here you have the Japhethites descended from the Africans,
well,
and then the Semitics are descended from the Japhethites. It's mixed around. It's backwards. They got it backwards.
Well, no. The thing is,
I want you to address that. I want you to explain that.
Well, the thing is that we are direct descendants.
No. I want you to explain the DNA. Why is the DNA switching around back? Why is it mixed up like that?
I just acknowledged that by saying that we are direct descendants.
I don't know. According to this,
over time, because again, the groups of people settled in different regions, they adapted to the environment.
I'm not talking about.
I'm saying
in the mitochondrial, they have the Japhethites descended from the Africans, but in the Y chromosome, they got the Semitic people descended from Africans. So
again, the thing is, look, do you understand that the individual has 46 chromosomes? You do understand that, yes?
Yes.
Okay, 23 and me, the me part is the other.
What's that got to do
Whether
with
you go with mitochondrial DNA or Y DNA, it doesn't matter because of migration and intermarriages between groups.
Hold on a second.
Right, you get a general pattern. Right, then you have specific patterns, haploid groups, like Icelanders, for example.
Okay,
right, they've been intermingling for centuries.
See the haploid group here, mtDNA? They have the Japhethites descended from Africans here. But over here, with the Y chromosome, they got the Semitic people descended from Africans. So which is it?
Okay, again, you're talking exactly what I'm explaining to you. 23 and 23. You have those 2 points, right, diverging from basic humanity, right? And you got the mitochondrial DNA and the Y DNA, and they all travel all over the place and mix in and get together and form babies.
You didn't explain the mix-up of the DNA of
who
descended from who.
Excuse me.
Let me show you another chart.
No, excuse me. Your argument dictates that it's only based on Y DNA. That's not so, because it's a combination of mitochondrial DNA and Y DNA that makes humanity up. You're trying to base it on one side of the chromosome group, right? You're just saying no, it's the male only. The females existed also, and they still do. The point being that your argument dictates that it's only one-sided. It's not. That's the point in science. You look at all aspects of it. And I'm not saying you're wrong.
I don't think you're saying anything. But anyways, look here. Here they have the. Oh, this is no good.
Yeah, it's no good because it proves him wrong again.
Here they have. This is the M. What's this? Y chromosomes through time.
Okay, but it starts there. Look at there in Africa.
This is
there. The same thing we had discussed.
But they're saying that the Semites descended from the Africans.
Descended from right.
And then the Japhethites descended from the Semites.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you. You're right in the Y side of things. But right there, it shows in Africa, if you follow the lines out, you get the different haploid groups.
I love how this actually shows that approximate first appearance of marker. I'm assuming this is a approximate first appearance of the genetic markers in the Y chromosome. So this blue over here, or this orange over here, and obviously this is an older one because it's showing East Africa, not West Africa. So this older one right here is showing 60,000 years. And then you've got to come back up and around over to West Africa, which actually adds a few thousand years on top of that. So obviously,
and then you get to your Moses.
Obviously, this is no good because it proves Jargon wrong.
Example, should I say? But it starts right there in Africa.
So why is it mixed up with the mtDNA line? Why is it the opposite? Why is it the opposite with the mtDNA?
No, that's not. You're not looking at it for what it is. That's the point.
See, the mtDNA, this is the African L1, 2, 3. The Japhethite is M, and the Semitic is N. All this N.
Okay, but the L1, L2 would probably stand for lineage.
Again, he's showing a population chart and not a migration chart or anything that would actually be relevant here. Let's see here. The data in this chart is supposed to represent the situation before the recent European expansion on beginning about 1500 AD. So yeah, roughly. Assignments in Australia are somewhat iffy. So yeah, again, mtDNA haplogroups in the world, a population chart, not a migration chart.
One, lineage two. It starts from Africa, not Moses.
But you're not explaining the mix-up, though. I'm trying to get you to explain why with the women, they got the women descended from Africans that are Japhethite first, and then on the Y chromosome, the paternal line, they have the Semitic men descended from Africans first. So why did they mix that up?
No, it starts from mitochondrial. It starts from the egg, not the chicken. Okay. Well, that was funny. My apologies. No, I didn't mean to be funny. But technically, what came first, the chicken or the egg? The egg came first, if you understand simple cell division. Okay, and it builds on that. So it's a mitochondrial.
But you have to have a father and a mother. You have to have Semitic fathers and Semitic mothers.
Look, you just try to ignore the previous science history and assume the Moses model. Okay, I don't disagree.
No, I'm looking at I'm just looking at the DNA evidence. I'm not looking at anything else. I'm looking at what the DNA evidence is.
Well, it says right there in the lower left-hand corner, Y DNA atom, the star. You see the pretty little star there in gray? That's where it starts. Okay,
it says right here.
You're showing me exactly what you showed me.
Right here, Adam. Right? This is Adam. So we got A, B, C, D.
A starts in Africa.
And then you have the Semitic people right here, right?
Right, that's after the fact. Right, you're right.
Semitic.
I'm disagreeing with you.
So how can you have Semitics descended from African?
Because it started.
And not what about the Semitic women? Where's the Semitic women?
Why are you going to bother asking about the women when you're looking at the Y chromosome chart? I mean, at this point in time, you're just trolling. Back it up a second or two. Okay. What Ronan was talking about right there in that little corner, there's the star. Okay. Yeah, it's literally right there. And yet somehow Jungle is reading this as saying, oh, well, we all came from over here somewhere around Turkey because that's where the ark landed. But yet I'm going to show you evidence that I claim supports me and proves me flat wrong. So I am still waiting as well. Pretty sure you've noticed that I haven't gotten a single notification. The last thing I got was him from well over an hour ago.
Looking at the DNA evidence. I'm not looking at anything else. I'm looking at what the DNA evidence is.
Well, it says right there in the lower left-hand corner, Y DNA atom, the star. You see the pretty little star there in gray? That's where it starts. Okay.
Right. It says.
Ronan, you make me laugh a lot. I'm sorry, your voice reminds me of my grandfather's, and it's really funny hearing you make fun of him like that without even realizing it.
Right here.
You're showing me exactly what you showed me.
Right here, Adam, right? This is Adam. So we got A, B, C, D.
A starts in Africa.
And then you have the Semitic people right here, right?
Right, that's after the fact. Right, you're right.
Semitic.
I'm disagreeing with you.
So how can you have Semitics descended from African?
Because it started
and not what about the Semitic women? Where's the Semitic women?
It's part of the haploid group that developed in the region.
The Semitic women, according to this one, came after the Japhethite women, which is contradictory.
Okay, is that based?
Notice how he does that bait and switch? He goes from the migration chart to a population chart. Dishonest tactics there, General.
Mitochondrial DNA or Y DNA?
This is mitochondrial, but it's contradictory.
No, like I said, L1, if you look where L1 is and L2, they're both in Africa. So after that, descendants came Moses. But you're trying to say no, because the Bible says the earth is 6,000 years old. Fine. That's what you want to believe. If you're right, but the science disagrees.
Here, what's this? Let me look for let me show you the mtDNA. They have, this is the one I want to show. This gives the order, this one here. So this one here. So you have the L. This is the L. L1. Then this is mixed up too, because look at this. Where's the 2? 2.
Really? I see the L2 is right there next to your cursor. So you got L0, L1, which splits off a couple of times, leads to L2. But then you've got all these other ones before you hit to L3. Apparently L2 line died out. That's pretty much all that is. But then you've got L3, and specifically from L3 is where all these other letters came from. Okay, so again, unless you're going to claim that this is mitochondrial Eve, therefore one of these is Noah's wife, one of these is well, no, that doesn't really work either, because you got 4 women. So even if we say that Noah's wife and then the kids' wives were somehow interrelated and somehow it managed to split off into the 4 women there, you're looking at one apparently very recently had a son and nothing else. Then you have one that had enough daughters to split a couple of times, and then that line died off. Then you had Well, I mean, I guess with the L0 right there, the L0D, maybe maybe Noah and his old lady had one daughter in there somewhere, and that's the line that died out there after she had a kid. But then you've got one over here that barely had any splits, and you got one over here that barely had any splits, and then you got one over here that basically populated the rest of the damn world. Okay. Again, it doesn't work like that. And your narrative doesn't fit this model. So I find it hilarious that you're actually bringing it up.
2 is right here. L2 is right here. L3. Okay. L1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
Okay. Then you have M, and all these M's. These are all M. All this here is the Japhethite women mitochondria, maternal line. So you got that right. According to this lineage, see this lineage they got here? They got this M descending from this.
Okay. If you look at the a horizontal line there, it starts with red, and I think it says one.
This
Oh, let it play for another couple of minutes. I'll give him a solid hour.
You notice the red matches up with Africa? That's where man started. Your narrative starts after that.
Empty DNA, but then they have the M first, and then the N. The N. This is the Semitic maternal DNA line. Let me see if I can find another, because this is confusing things here.
All you're finding is anything that supports my position. That's why you keep jumping around, and you'll keep jumping around, because the information you're sharing with me supports my position. If you understand what you're looking at, and you don't want to, I believe you do know.
This is why.
I believe you do know. I do sincerely believe that you know, but for the sake of believing in your God, you'll deny it, and that's fair enough.
And I absolutely agree with you, Your Honor.
That's what you want to believe. That's what you want to believe. But the science that you're showing me disagrees with you.
Oh, there we go. Take a look at this paper. Oh, I missed it by a second. Let's see, 30. There we go. Okay. So if you look at it, Y-DNA Adam, this is most recent common ancestor. Okay. If you look at it in tree form, it makes it even worse for jungle, because then you realize that, it's literally all of these different letters turning into these other different letters. So he's going to backtrack on this pretty quick.
Disagrees with you and supports my position. You're not reading these. You're looking for something.
You can believe what you want to believe.
Oh, you're cherry picking. I think that's it.
You can believe what you want to believe.
No, I can prove what I'm saying with your own charts.
Okay, so tell me this. Why are there no C's and D's in Africa?
Because they happened after that. Because if you start with the first letter, then it's the second letter, then it's the third letter.
These are Egyptian. See,
hierarchy. What do you want to call it?
See this Egyptian here?
It starts with 1, goes to 2.
You're gonna have to listen. You're gonna have to listen. See the Egyptian?
What about them? They came after. Why?
You're gonna have to listen. You're gonna have to listen.
Okay,
Egyptian is Mitzrayim. They're E. They have an E-Y chromosome. So all the descendants of Mitzrayim are E.
Okay.
Because they went in Africa.
Okay, it's been a good hour. I'm going to show you guys one more time. That way I'm showing my receipts. Fun word. 58 minutes. Emailed you the link. Come in whenever you want. If you can prove your point. He still hasn't showed up.
He settled Egypt with his mother, whose name is.
And I'm going to point out real quick right here. He's sitting there talking about Egyptus and Mithraim and all the other wives of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. You're still on the Y chromosome chart. Women do not have a Y chromosome, so you're just talking out of your ass at this point. And I will say that until you can find me a scientific paper that specifically says that those letters are associated with Shem, Ham, Japheth, Mithraim, Egyptus, and all the other people that you're claiming they are, because you're not going to. I guarantee it. So let's go ahead and drop this stream. I'm done. When you spend 12 hours arguing with a stubborn old man, it tends to get you irritated. So I figured I'd go ahead and share that lovely bit with you guys. Okay. So, needless to say, Jungle Jargon, you're a crazy old bastard. Or sorry, you're a kooky old bastard. I will call out your bullshit every time I see you on Modern Day Debate. I will call out your bullshit if I get bored enough to jump into one of your hangouts, because obviously you apparently don't take me seriously, or you seem to think that you know, the kid that you know, irritates you in your chats doesn't want to learn, or whatever goes through that weird head of yours. And I don't mean weird as in funny looking. I mean weird as in your thought processes, because you are, at this point in time, you're about as oxymoronic as a barking parrot. Yeah, I'm gonna get some sleep. You guys have fun. Try to think rationally. Eat your meat. It's good for you.